Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Friday, June 6th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris here with you. On this episode, we'll get you ready for weekend waiver pickups. We're going to continue with our new format, looking at players at various roster rates, trying to determine which routes you should choose. Lots of different options out there. Some really intriguing names actually starting to get dropped off of shallow league rosters. So we'll spend some time on those players. There is some baseball news you should know, so we'll get to that in just a couple minutes as well. And we have hot dogs of the world, taste of the majors. Niv Shah joins us later on in the show with a double header, 2 dog reviews coming up a little bit later on today. So we're looking forward to that. You went to the ballpark yesterday and you weren't working. How was it?
It was good. I mean, the dog I had wasn't great, but we don't need a full review of that. It's just, when you don't grill it quite enough and it's just not, it doesn't pop, like the skin isn't like, like kind of crunchy or whatever.
Yeah.
It didn't snap. I had a bratwurst that didn't snap and I was kind of like, it's just a little soft. When it gets a little soft, it's just like,
Yep. That's a boiled it, but didn't get it on the grill long enough situation.
Yeah, exactly. Other than that, great. It was a perfect day. My dad came out and it was a day in the yard with the boys. The weather was perfect. It was a good game all the way through. And afterwards, we went to the mall and did an escape room and had some mall food and extended the day a little bit. It was an long, exhausting day. But they're super happy to start, their summer vacation that way. So now they're on screens for a little bit, but I'm going to kick them off later.
On screens during the recording to keep things nice and quiet in the house.
That's right. Yeah.
Totally understandable. As I mentioned up top, some baseball news you should know. Kyle Tucker was back in the lineup on Thursday, so just nice to see that didn't turn into a IL stint for him. He went 1-for-4 with a couple of walks, nothing actionable there, just good news if you want to throw him back into your lineup for the weekend. Probably the best news of all was actually that Francisco Lindor should be able to avoid the IL, according to Will Salmon of The Athletic. Lindor suffered a fractured toe after getting hit by a pitch by Tony Gonsolin earlier this week. And as soon as I saw the first day-to-day update on that, I thought, this is going to immediately turn into at least a short IL stint, or maybe it'll cut some of his chances to steal bases. And that's still a possibility. Maybe you take it a little bit easy, relatively speaking, take some of that risk of aggravation out in the short term. But all in all, it kind of seems like Lindor is going to be able to manage this and play through it.
He's been such an amazingly consistent player. I'm just looking at what he's done since he's come into the league, and he's just such a consistent player. I mean, not necessarily on like a month-to-month level, like we usually have these streaks where people are like, what's wrong with Lindor, But when you look up at the end of the year, he just always posts. I do wonder if maybe the seasonal total this year for steals will be a little bit lighter than it's been in this stolen base rules era. Maybe he'll only get to like 20, 25, 20. I wouldn't be surprised if it was only like 20, if he really took a rest on the stealing. Because this type of thing just hurts. It just hurts. He'll be able to play through it, but it hurts.
Yeah, that would be my expectation as well. Projections have him, I think, between 14 and 16 the rest of the way. That'd get him to 27. So I wouldn't expect much more than that, especially in the context of this ailment. Josh Naylor left early on Thursday. Apparently, he's been playing through hand and shoulder injuries. That was learned by Nick Picoro of the Arizona Republic a little bit earlier this week. And Naylor's one of those guys I have absolutely nowhere, I'm not rooting against him. I just realize every time I read a note about him, like, yeah, this guy doesn't impact my life at all. If he does something good, it's bad for my teams. If he's not playing well, it ends up being good for my teams. So far this season, 12 by 12 player rater, 5 by 5 leagues, Josh Naylor's the 59th ranked player, including pitchers. Like, that's pretty amazing given what we observed about Chase Field and left-handed power, right? That park suppresses left-handed homers in a big way. Josh Naylor producing in year one in Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, he's cut down on a strikeout rate, and there's an accompanying cut down on swing strike rate, although it's pretty minor. And he's stealing bases. He's 9 stolen bases this year. His career high is 10 in the season. So I think that's how he's keeping that afloat, along with the batting average. I would have to say the people that have Naylor are probably a little disappointed with the power output. The bat speed is down a little bit. The barrel rate is down a little bit. As you say, the park doesn't help. He's projected right now to get to about 20 homers, maybe. And I actually think that might be his true talent. If you look at before, he was kind of like a low 20s homer guy. Then he had that big outburst of homers last year in Cleveland, where the park factor was really weird last year. So I think this is who he is. I think he's kind of a 20 and 10 guy.
Which is really, again, the 10 is the surprising part. Maybe it ends up being a little bit more in that category with 9 steals in the bank already. The thing about Naylor that I probably underrated throughout the draft season, I think he's rarely going to hurt you in average. Like last year at 243, that wasn't necessarily bad, but that to me felt like the lower end of his outcomes, especially for a guy that consistently carries like a mid-teens strikeout rate. He's got that down to 12.9% so far this year. I look at him as a pretty solid, balanced player overall. Like it's kind of like the profile we hoped Alex Verdugo was going to have a few years ago. I think that's what a typical Josh Naylor season is going to look like, where you're getting just about average or better production all the way across the board. And that Arizona lineup, as we know, is really solid top to bottom. Had a eruption in the 9th inning against Atlanta on Thursday to steal a game against the Braves, which was pretty wild finish. But Naylor, doing it a different way so far. And the only thing I'm looking at in the underlying numbers that would give me a little bit of pause about the power is that the ground ball rate has ticked back up to some of his earlier career numbers. He's at 49.3%. The last 2 seasons, he was at 46.8 and 42.7%. So just want to see what he's able to do with that. If he's able to lift the ball a little more consistently, he'll still probably get to that 20 home run total over the course of the year, as long as these injuries are not part of the problem. 2 players with rehab assignments that have been put on pause. Brandon Woodruff, yet again, after getting hit in the elbow, the pitching elbow by a comebacker. Fortunately, the diagnosis right now is a contusion. But Brandon Woodruff's road back from the anterior capsule surgery has had a whole bunch of extra bumps as he's tried to get through these last couple of rehab outings at AAA. You've talked about the stuff not being, as crisp as it was pre-surgery, which is not a surprise given the extent of what he had done. Anterior capsule is a big, big deal, but there's still no timetable for him to get back out there because for now, the contusion, the swelling around his elbow is just going to keep him sidelined.
Yeah. The stuff numbers in the minors for Woodruff suggest that the only above average pitch he really has is the sweeper, which he throws the least. And we also sometimes kind of gaze askance at stuff plus numbers for sweepers. So the changeup 101, I guess that counts too, but the most salient number is that the fastballs for Woodruff for me are probably not coming back to where they were before. 90 stuff plus on the sinker, 84 on the 4-seam. And it's weird. The results have been pretty good, but he's also, 16 of those innings came in A ball, where he's a man among boys. And then in AAA, decent results. But I also wonder why 9 starts and 38 innings in the minor leagues. That suggests to me that something is not quite right.
Well, a couple of outings cut short by injury, but then also just being built up really from like a spring training workload perspective. And they had to bring him along really carefully because of the timetable for all of this. What do the location numbers look like for
It doesn't
Woodruff?
take 9 starts in.
Well, no, but it's because he had to stop with the ankle injury. The ankle injury stopped him the first time, then he had to start it up again. So it's been a really bizarre progression.
Location looks okay, except for the fastball. 91 location on the fastball. Sinker, though, 104 location. Everything else above average location. So he's struggling to land the fastball and the curveball. That's not great.
Not great. We'll see where it goes from here. But for now, the return of Brandon Woodruff remains on hold. Shane Bieber was actually scratched from a scheduled rehab start that was scheduled for today due to soreness. He was going to pitch at AA Akron, had some soreness after throwing a bullpen session on Tuesday, and now he's going to check in with Dr. Keith Meister, a guy whose name keeps getting bigger in the Rates and Barrels word cloud, and I don't like it, not because I have any sort of personal beef with Dr. Meister, but because it means we're talking about pitching injuries a lot.
Yeah, I don't like it one bit. I wonder where the line is. We talk a little bit about liking somebody a little bit better on return from surgery if they've demonstrated their health at some point, right? And Bieber this year has thrown 2 1/3 innings in the complex league. So I would suggest to you that is not the line.
No, that's not quite
However,
the line, no.
I want to bring up Eury Pérez because I believe he's really close to the line, wherever that line is. Because Eury Pérez has thrown 22 innings in 8 starts. I guess, what am I saying? Like the Woodruff thing?
It's the way they had to build him up. It's just the timetable.
Yeah.
You can't hold that against him.
Yeah, okay, I get it. Eury Pérez somehow is much closer to having demonstrated that he's ready and that he's somebody you can bet upon. You know what I mean? So that's the line, somewhere between 2.3 innings, 2.1 innings, and 22.2 innings in the minor leagues.
I mean, we've talked about it with guys that come back at the end of the regular season from an injury, make even a couple of starts. Jacob deGrom didn't have full deGrom workloads late last year, but looked enough like himself where I felt like we could make a read on the pitcher we thought he would be this year, an educated guess, some kind of reasonable prediction. So, yeah, I think it is a relatively low number. But, yeah, Bieber cruising through one outing in the complex league, I would agree. Not quite enough to say, yep, he's back. And, of course, there's not really a lot of data for an outing like that, at least data available to us. So hopefully it ends up just being some soreness. Could be, a case of a veteran wanting to make sure everything's okay. Hopefully it's not a setback, but we will know soon enough. Let's talk about some bats of interest. I mean, Jack Caglianone week in NFBC formats where he wasn't stashed, like he's going to command some massive, massive bids. But if you're in a 12 team or you're in the online championship and you're looking at Caglianone versus Max Muncy, let's say you're just trying to find a utility guy, you're just trying to find the best available source of power. That's kind of an interesting toss-up because in some ways the year one expectation for Jack Caglianone by projection probably isn't that far off from the projection for Max Muncy.
Yeah, I mean the projection. I mean, if we cherry pick some projections, Zips has a 221, basically 221 batting average, 400 slugging for Jack, and for Muncy. I mean, you do have to cherry pick a little bit. If you slip over to Max Muncy's page, you get a 220 average and a 430 slugging. So projections always favor the veteran, so maybe it's not surprising that the slugging is higher for Max Muncy. The upside is obviously higher for Jack, so I would put a higher bid on him. But in that 12-team situation where you're looking at all these guys, and you can put Ryan O'Hearn on your trade, on your pickup tree or whatever it's called, like your waterfall. If Ryan O'Hearn is on that waterfall and Kyle Stowers is on that waterfall and maybe even Adolis Garcia is on that waterfall, then I think that you should reduce the top number on Caglianone to some extent because you have a bunch of other options that may even be better. They're projected to be better, and you may give yourself some more flexibility down the line by picking up O'Hearn over Caglianone, and it might be the right move.
Yeah, I think that group of under 80% hitters is pretty interesting. The fallers especially. Like Matt McLain is starting to slip a little bit. Christian Campbell, I think in some shallow redraft leagues, starting to fall off of some rosters because people are getting a little bit impatient. And Royce Lewis also starting to fall too, down to 75% rostered in CBS. And I was surprised. I mean, I thought a healthy Royce Lewis was going to be a very productive player. I guess it's easy to forget that around all the injuries, he still doesn't have a ton of big league experience. I mean, you add it all up, and now we're just over a full season's worth of major league games, 692 career plate appearances, 34 homers, 6 steals, a 252, 314, 462 line in the overall body of work. But so far this year, Royce Lewis hitting 139 with a 218 OBP and a 215 slug. It just makes me think that he's trying to play through some kind of injury still.
I think he's just pressing. He's famously said he doesn't slump, and then he went on the most massive slump ever. I had a real quick image here that I just think if you look at Royce Lewis's rolling chase percentage and what he's doing at the plate, they almost always go in opposite directions. So if he's not chasing, he's doing well. If he is chasing, he's doing poorly. He has been chasing to begin this year, but most recently that has come back down. He is chasing less. And if you look at his rolling WOBA, it is on its way up. So I believe that he's about to figure this out, and I would pick him up. The other interesting guy, I did look at Matt McLain because he also feels like, maybe we overvalued him after 2023, and this is what he actually is. But I looked at barrel, hard hit, and max EV comps for his isolated slugging, both in 2023 and 2024. And so in 2023, he had a 216 ISO and a 385 BABIP. That was over his skis. His comps had a 182 ISO for Matt McLain versus 216, and his comp BABIP was 303 versus 385, right? So this year, he's not quite barreling as well, but he's hitting it harder, same max EV. His comps have changed a little bit. His comp ISO is 164. His projected ISO is 184, and his actual ISO is 122. So you can say maybe he doesn't have as much power as he's projected to have, but he has more power than he's showing right now. His current BABIP is 229. His comp is 307. So he's better than what he is now. Maybe he isn't as good as we thought he was after 2023, but he's better than what he is now, and he's better than what should be available on your wire. So I don't know. The thing that's so hard about this is I'm like, these guys should be all owned. I look at this list and I'm like, what are you doing? How is O'Hearn on the waiver wire? How is McLain on the waiver wire? So I know that people are making difficult decisions. So even if I have to decide between people who are on this list, I'm going to take Matt McLain over Christian Campbell, because Christian Campbell is in the midst of a freshman slump. I would rather have the guy who's kind of taken these ups and downs in the past. What other decisions am I making here? I guess I would take Doyle over Garcia just because he's younger. I think he's more likely to steal more. I would take Ryan O'Hearn over Miguel Vargas and Jorge Polanco, because I think Ryan O'Hearn is a slugger. He knows what he's doing.
What about Polanco versus McLain? I mean, McLain is 11 for 11 as a base stealer. He's getting to some power. Yeah, the slash line is bad right now. But just as we are worried about the weather having a negative impact on Andrew Abbott, at least some negative impact as the summer months roll along, I imagine that very same impact will be a positive development for McLain on the power perspective, on top of getting further away from the injuries that sidelined him for all of last year. But Jorge Polanco was on fire to begin the season, cooled off a lot in May. The combination of the 2 months, still it's good overall, right? 10 homers in 49 games, a 253 average is fine for roto leagues. OBP is a little light at 300, but he's slashed the K rate down to 13.5%. And we've never seen Jorge Polanco carry a hard hit rate like this. 48.9% in that category, second best barrel rate of his career. Like, what do you make of the uneven but overall still positive first 50-ish games from Jorge Polanco relative to the likes of McLain and some of the other guys?
I don't know. I look at that age, 31, and I look at that ballpark, and I'm a little surprised by how streaky Polanco has been. So I don't really have an analytical reason for this, but he makes me more nervous than a lot of the other guys on this list.
Yeah. Hey, you got your reason. It's just trying to put your finger on it. But the injuries, I mean, that's a pretty big part of the story for Jorge Polanco. Just hard to read.
You have a Seattle Park risk with him. You have an age risk. You have an injury risk with him. Those are all quantifiable things.
Right. I think that's what it is for me. I like the core skills. He's shown enough power over enough years where I believe that's going to be there. It just might come with a lower average in OBP than you would want. So he's down 14% in roster rate over the last week, down to 62%. Could be useful in some places. I wanted to ask you about Parker Meadows. He is back, and with Meadows' return, Javier Baez's playing time looks like it's going to dip a little bit, so interest in Baez is falling accordingly. What's the expectation for Parker Meadows now that he's healthy again?
I put together a comp list here of Parker Meadows. These are players that are projected to have less than a 750 OPS, more than a 240 average, and more than 9 homers and 12 stolen bases. I think this is an interesting list because it's not a whole list of slam dunks, but I think these people should be owned in all these. Cedric Mullins, Jeremy Pena, Jason Dominguez, TJ Friedel, Tommy Edmonds, CJ Abrams, Brenton Doyle, Pete Crow Armstrong, Luis Robert Jr., Josh Lowe, Matt McLain. Right? Like this is like at least 80% rostered in most leagues. So right there you say, oh, he's 40% rostered and he's in a group where they're all 80% rostered. Okay, he's a pickup.
That's an amazing list, and we're going to have to spend more time on a future episode talking about PCA being right next to Brenton Doyle.
Yeah, that's right.
Like some of these comps for PCA, I think, would make Cubs fans very upset. And I know there's been some chatter about how early Pete Crow Armstrong would be drafted if we were redrafting today, or what his 2026 ADP might look like. And I don't think anybody would bucket him with this group of players as far as where they would expect him to go. So it could be a relative peak, or at least a near-term peak, if you want to cash in Pete Crow Armstrong in a long-term league, even though the future still looks like it's pretty bright. Going a little further down the list for some lower rostered guys, Ronny Mauricio finally back after a long recovery from a torn ACL. Just nice to see him back on the field, kind of in the similar vein to McCullers getting back from all of his arm injuries. Mauricio actually held his place on Keith Law's prospect list for a while after he got hurt, which to me kind of says there's a lot of tools and things to be excited about. What do you think about his playing time outlook for this Mets club, and another guy that's just knocking off a lot of rust, having not seen big league pitching in basically 2 years?
I don't know what it is. What's he going to play? Is he pushing McNeil to the outfield? He's been playing so far at second base in the minors, and he played at third base. It's a Vientos thing. Vientos is hurt.
Vientos is on the IL.
Yeah, I would assume this is a short-term situation, and I would just rather use it as more of a look-see to gather information. Maybe you are in a super deep league where just anybody who's going to play every day, he probably might play every day as the third baseman while Vientos is out, but it's like a 2-week thing. So it's a churn and burn situation for me. In his tier, I'd much rather have one of the Jesus Sanchez, Trevor Larnach, Matt Wallner group. Matt Wallner hits the ball super hard, should give you a lot of power. Larnach is more of a balanced line, a little bit better batting average. And Jesus Sanchez gives you a little bit of speed. The only problem with all three is they are a little bit difficult to own in weekly leagues. All three of them are going to lose playing time against lefties at certain times. And so would be nice is maybe to have 2 of them on your roster and just hope to avoid as many lefties as possible by switching them out for each other in weekly leagues in a situation like that.
Yeah, those weekly formats are a little tricky for players that are clearly big side platoon guys. The other thought I have, though, on Mauricio, if you're in a keeper or dynasty league, I mean, I held him in Devil's Rejects with our buddy JH. And the reason I wanted to wait it out is because I think there's the possibility of a 5-category player, more likely 4. Like it could be a slightly low average or a slightly low OBP, but there's power, there's speed.
And the steals have kind of gone down through the injuries.
A little bit, but I mean, he came back in 9 games at AAA, 4 for 5 as a base stealer. He had a 564 OBP, so he had a lot of chances to run, but he popped 3 homers in that brief time at that level. I think the fact that he was already running at this point, like taking the long road back, I think that bodes pretty well. And he's young enough. I mean, being
he's
24,
still only 24. Yeah.
Yeah. Like an ACL tear in your late 20s is a lot different than an ACL tear in your early 20s. So I'm kind of optimistic that Ronny Mauricio could pop up on a board, much like your Parker Meadows comps at some point. Guys that have kind of like 2020 tools and maybe a little bit of overall like OPS downside, but it's the question will be, is it good enough? Is he good enough defensively? Does he fit on this roster well enough when everybody's healthy to get the playing time that a lot of those other guys get? That's going to be what determines it.
He's also going to have to hit the ball super hard to hit his way to an OBP, if that makes any sense. There are players that can hit their way to a decent OPP. I think of somebody maybe like a Caminero, right? Where they have like a 5 or 6% walk rate, but they still get to a 320 OBP just by running like a 320 BABIP, and that'll be Mauricio's way to a decent OBP if he has one.
Second base has been hot garbage too, and Mauricio is at least eligible there, so it could be a bit of help for deeper leagues. Last two hitters I want to throw at you from the lowest possible roster rates, under 20% on CBS. Cole Young up for the Mariners, and Jacob Melton, if you're looking for some outfield help, 9% rostered right now. We know Yordan Alvarez has a more serious injury than was first reported, so the window is pretty open for someone to claim a lot of playing time in that Houston outfield mix. And Melton can play some center field. Also missed some time this year with injuries of his own, back and groin injuries. So we didn't get a full look at him at AAA Sugarland. But I think Melton's kind of interesting in 15-team leagues, especially if we see him play consistently over the course of this weekend.
Yeah, and what I just need from him is to stop swinging and missing. It's been pretty rough. There was the game on the 4th of June where he struck out every single time. I do think that'll calm down. It was nice to see him come back the very next day, be in the lineup. Maybe, that helps him. Just be like, okay, I just had maybe the worst game of my career. I went 0 for 3 with 3 strikeouts, and they put me back in the lineup. And that day he had 2 hits and 2 RBI and a stolen base. And that's maybe he calmed those jitters a little bit, and we'll see some better production going forward. I've been on record as to saying that I like a lot of his skills. He has a little bit more power than you might expect. He could combine that with power and speed. Offensively, he's, I think, a superior ceiling guy than Jake Myers. But Jake Myers' defense will keep him on the field.
Yeah, Myers is still good enough to play and make an impact. As far as Young goes, 5 straight starts since getting the call just over a week ago now. So a lot of playing time opportunity at second base for him in that Seattle lineup for now, starting off stuck in that bottom third.
Yeah, I'm worried. Jeff Ponce thought that he could maybe hit for average. I'm a little worried that that the stick is so light that he won't necessarily hit for average. But in the deepest league situations, he's got to be owned just because it looks like they're giving him, at least a 3-4 weeks look at this job. Maybe Ryan Bliss comes back and takes the job back or whatever it is. But I think that the way that they're using, the way they're playing him is just, hey, here's a shot. We're giving you a shot. You could take this job.
Young was a first rounder out of high school in 2022, and he's already up. That's a pretty fast track to the big leagues. He's done it with really good plate skills. He's shown speed at a lot of stops, getting to a little more power this year too. Jeff was great, by the way, last week. I thought he was a great guest to have on. Does great work over at Baseball America, and he's among the many people I owe a thank you to for stepping in while I was out. I was surprised looking at the CBS roster rates today. Eury Pérez is only 78% rostered. There must be some leagues, I play in at least one, where you can't add players that are on the IL. So unless he was drafted and stashed, you have to wait until he comes back to actually pick him up. But he's in this bunch. So here's the bunch. We'll start with the biggest group of pitchers, the pitchers just under 80% or near that 80% roster rate. You're looking at Eury Pérez against guys like Lance McCullers, Jack Leiter, Sandy Alcantara is starting to dip in terms of his roster rates, Walker Buehler, Clark Schmidt, Noah Cameron, if you're looking for someone kind of rising, going the other way. And you might even be balancing all of those names against somebody like Jesus Luzardo, who has just been crushed in his last 2 outings. A combined 20 earned runs his last 2 times out after he allowed just 16 runs in his first 11 starts.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that. If you look at his velo, which is, I think he's really velo dependent. It's been there. He's been 96.8, 96.5 in the last 2 games. So pretty good. That's right around normal velo for him. If you look at his movement patterns, not a lot of difference, except maybe the sinker, a little bit more erratic. I don't see a pattern there otherwise. And so I would just assume that it had something to do with a game blip in location. If you look at his location plus for the year, the last two he really struggled to locate his fastball, and it hasn't been a problem all year. So I'm going to shrug it off. I'm going to say it's just one of those things. People run into it every once in a while. It's just a little bug, and he'll right the ship. That's how I feel about him, because the stuff is mostly consistent. The sinker is a little up and down, but it's the location that stands out, and that actually makes me feel good. And so Luzardo for me doesn't belong on this list. I think he shouldn't be dropped. And the other name that I'm still gonna ride or die with is Sandy Alcantara. I'm gonna take those two names off that list and say, give me those two, and I'll be happy. I know it looks bad. and the bad news for Sandy Alcantara is I think the slider's gone. I think the slider's never coming back. And this is something that came up on the craft with Nick Pollock, but I looked at all the people who improved their slider location numbers by at least 20 points, which is what Sandy Alcantara would need to do to get his slider usable, because he has a 70 location plus on the slider, right? Like, he cannot locate the slider. And the only other people that have ever done it, there's only been two players that have ever done it. And both players stopped throwing the slider. That's how they got around it. It was like Blake Snell, when he stopped throwing the slider, and Tanner Bybee when he changed the shape of all of his breaking balls and basically stopped throwing that version. So I think Sandy Alcantara is not really ever going to throw that slider again. Why do I think this is good news? Well, in the last start, he leaned into the curve, which actually has okay location plus, has okay stuff plus. He leaned into the sinker, which has been valuable for him. And there's been some signs of life. I know it was also the Rockies on the road, so it was about the best that the situation could be. But I would feel okay. I picked up Sandy Alcantara in one league where he was dropped. And I'm using him basically as a team streamer, where I'll use him in good situations at home and avoid him on the rest until he kind of shows something better.
Right. I mean, at least at a minimum, that plays in a lot of formats. And you look at the overall body of work this season. Before that outing against the Rockies, 6 innings, 2 earned, 4 Ks, just 1 walk. The earned run out in each outing before that, at San Diego, 6. At the Angels, 5. Home against the Rays, 4 earned. Road against the White Sox, 4 earned. Home against the Dodgers, 5 earned. Road against the Dodgers, 7 earned. I mean, it's been just a miserable stretch for Sandy. So to see even basically making a layup, that's at least a nudge in the right direction. I wonder if that's just going to be a blueprint in the sense of, okay, that we can work this way. We can use this arsenal and still get a lot of guys out and still be really good, even if we're not quite, Cy Young Sandy at this point. Like, that would still be a really big outcome. And there's probably still enough time between now and the trade deadline where if they can find something that works for these next 7 or 8 starts, the interest in him as a trade target will probably tick back up. I don't think it's going to take a lot for teams to say, all right, this works again. We're interested in getting an upgrade in our rotation. So still time for the Marlins, still time for Sandy. I could see those shallow leaguers getting impatient and seeing some names that are at least pretty interesting in that group. You have some tough decisions to make. We haven't talked about Lance McCullers really at all on this show. And just the fact that he got back from injury at all, I think is remarkable. Like, I thought maybe we had seen Lance McCullers on the big league mound for the last time, just given the length of his absence. So he's back out there, and I don't have, pie in the sky sort of expectations for McCullers. He's got a career 3.51 ERA and a 1.26 whip. If those were his ratios the rest of the way, that'd be, to me, like one of the best case scenarios for results, given that he didn't pitch in 23 or 24, given that he's still going to walk guys, and given that he is giving up some hard contact early on so far too. Like, I'm still a little worried about him having to knock some more rust off here in the weeks and even months ahead.
Yeah, I don't trust him. I didn't even rank him as high as his projections suggest I should in the rankings. He was a little bit lower than his projections. And the reason why is that he's throwing fewer fastballs than, like, I looked back and there's only like 2 or maybe 2 seasons of a qualified starting pitcher throwing fewer fastballs, throwing a smaller fastball rate. Just makes me nervous. It just makes me nervous that people are going to sit slider, and then that's going to take away the efficacy of his best pitches, And when I see that hard hit rate, and when I see that home run rate, which is out of whack with what he's done in the past, I know that, my brain says, hey, the home run rates are really noisy. He should regress to his personal mean, but my heart says they're sitting slider, dude, and that might be different than what he's done in the past. It's really just a record few amount of fastballs. And, the other guys on the list that didn't throw fastballs were not super heartening. It wasn't. There was Logan Gilbert this year. There was the best pitcher in the 10 around him. And yes, that list is skewed towards now because there are more and more pitchers that are throwing fewer fastballs. But another guy on the list that sort of reminds me is sort of Tanner Houck was on that list of very few fastballs, lots of sliders. And I think that sort of risk of maybe a decent stretch, but also just a terrible collapse sits there for McCullers.
There's a few reasons I'm rooting for him. One, the long injury. Two, McCullers was on the receiving end of death threats soon after returning from the IL. Just a horrible situation, apparently from an inebriated and frustrated bettor, which is just disgusting. And he's managed to, despite the stress from all of that, continue to kind of put the pieces back together. Last 2 starts, kind of doing we talked about Jacob deGrom with Trevor yesterday, and you're like, well, deGrom hasn't looked the same the last 2 outings. McCullers' last 2 outings, he's gone 6 innings both times out. It was 6 scoreless against the Pirates with 7 Ks and 1 walk, and it was 6 against the A's with 3 earned but 12 Ks in the start before that. So it's a little bit unconventional, but I think he might have good enough stuff to still make it work. I think the typical Lance McCullers start is going to be more in that 5-inning range, maybe 5 innings with 5 or 6 Ks. So I think he will be getting deep enough into games to be eligible for wins. The Astros bullpen, high quality bullpen, capable of protecting leads. I think maybe you're looking at slightly inflated ratios with good Ks and higher than average win probabilities for a guy that pitches as deep into his starts as McCullers will on occasion. So I kind of like him in deeper leagues.
What did he do in those two starts that was different? Completely turfed the 4-seam, just did not even throw one.
Right. And eventually you're right. I think, the way hitters are going to approach that will be different.
Yeah. Well, it is a little different than a Tanner Houck because he does have multiple breaking balls, right? And he does have a good changeup. So it's just remarkable to see someone you're like, oh, this guy's throwing 20% fastballs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't trust it. But on that list, actually, just a side, I did have something weird happen this last week where somebody said some rude stuff on social media and then apologized afterwards. And I thought that I was like, wow. And they were like, yeah, I'd been drinking all day.
It happens. In terms of like a more based sort of situation, like the McCullers threats are inexcusable, but being rude to someone, it happens. I've been rude to people. You just have to acknowledge it, and apologize, and do better.
Oh yeah, shout out to that person. That was I was like, hey man, this thank you. This doesn't happen very often.
Very kind to own up to that mistake. So nice to hear that. So of this group,
the rest of this list, though, Eury Pérez, so Sandy is a soft second for me, right?
But Yuri's one.
Yeah, I was looking at Eury. I was like, if I'm ranking these guys, I think it's Jesus, Eury, Sandy, and then around McCullers, I think I'm putting Clark Schmidt above McCullers.
Schmidt over McCullers. I think both have low health grades, but Schmidt's not quite as low of a health grade as McCullers. Given, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and little bit of stuff returning, I believe, for Clark Schmidt, at least in terms of his velo is at least up from when he started. I mean, his cutter, the first couple starts was like 91. Now he's comfortably 93. I also just like that he's figured out his, the cutter is his primary fastball now. And he can use that, and he demonstrates good command of it. And I think he's settling into what he is. I think he is a little risky at times because he's going to be facing a lot of tough opponents in tough parks. But other than that, like, I think he's a pretty solid pitcher. The rest, I might take a pass on all of them. I might just say Walker Buehler, Jack Leiter, Noah Cameron. Thank you for your service.
Yeah, you got to tread pretty carefully, I think, with that group as a whole. And Cameron, the results are great. 107 ERA since May 1st, but you're talking about what? A 17% strikeout rate? I mean, that's just not going to fly in most leagues.
16
Leiter
right now, a 485 Sierra and a 91 mile an hour fastball.
Right. And Leiter, since May 1st, is 6.2% K minus BB percentage. It's the lowest of the 7 guys that have pitched that are in this group.
I mean, I have a fair amount of shares. I have a main event share. I have, and so I'm riding this up and down. It's crazy that the stuff has just been really good. The stuff plus has been really good all year, and the location plus is not good. It's really bad. And I think that's what's just robbing him of efficacy. But then you switch over to like the results dashboard, and you're like, every time you want to drop Jack Leiter, he throws a gem. And you're just like, what? What do I do? He's just throwing 2 gems in a row, and yet he still hasn't been in our active roster. He's been on our bench the whole time. I don't know what to do with him. Last 2 starts, though, would you want to point to, some change that's easily identifiable? I think it's maybe the most balanced mix he's thrown all year in terms of fastballs and sinkers and sliders and curves. There's nothing that stands out in terms of velocity or stuff. The location plus in the last 2 games, 94 and 99. Maybe that's, if he can settle there, he'd be usable. But it's maddening. Maddening is the word.
Maddening indeed. And it looks like the exact profile of someone we would be talking about as a certain regression candidate. If this were built up over a larger share of innings, be like, come on, this is like some Andrew Abbott stuff, but it's worse underlying numbers. Like the sub 20% K rate for the season, above 10% walk rate. I guess the big difference is the home run to fly ball compared to every stop Jack Leiter has had as a pro is better. He's down to a 7.9% home run to fly ball rate. If you look at all of his minor league stops, it's like 12.5% was the previous best at AA all the way back in 2022.
I think that's the changeup in the sinker that he's added this year at the major league level.
So if you've neutralized the home run a little bit, that accounts for some of it. And Oopsie says 4.14 ERA, 132 WHIP, by far the most optimistic of the public-facing projections. Can you at least get comfortable with that sort of expectation? Right now, he's putting up a 348 and a 116. So it'd still be a reasonable crash, but not unusable if he actually hits that projection and you're able to use him carefully at home and in favorable matchups. Like that to me is sort of the tagline for Jack Leiter right now. Is he's not a crock pot pitcher. You're not just throwing him in there and leaving him in there. You're just going to be a little more careful.
There's probably some places where you could have avoided some bad outings. I mean, he had more walks than strikeouts at Boston. I don't think he would have started him at Boston. But he also had more walks than strikeouts at San Francisco. And in terms of walks and strikeouts, at least his best game this season has been at Cincinnati. So he's varied. His strikeout rate has varied from game to game from 38% in that Cincinnati game to 8% against Seattle. And his walk rate has varied from 0% to 25%. So it's just all over the place. I think the best use case that I can come up with Jack Leiter is throw in a keeper league deal.
Yeah,
if you
because someone
just
can
want
talk
like a
themselves into
little
him
bit
getting
of
better. Yeah.
extra spice, I could be on either side of it. I could
Mhm.
trade Leiter because it's pretty volatile, and if I need something better for this year, then I'll do it. I could accept Leiter because if I was rebuilding, I'd be like, hey, at least the Stuff Plus and the great games show you the upside that is there.
At some point, we should try and put together a list of the 10 most tradable players, like guys that you would, like just like Leiter, guys you would trade for, but guys you'd actually be okay trading away too, because then we'll
That's
see
an
if we're.
interesting list.
Yeah, it's an interesting list of players. Like, I feel good enough about this player to add him to my team, but I feel confident enough he's not a superstar to go ahead and flip him away to get something that helps me more.
Yeah. It's a hard list because the list of players we're all comfortable trading away, I mean, that's a long one. And the list of players that we all are comfortable trading for is a long one too. But the kind of, the
Venn diagram.
The Venn diagram does not have a huge sliver in the middle.
I don't think it does. So finding 10 players will be a challenge.
This next list that you've got, pitchers under 60% rostered, includes Mick Abel, Zach Littell, Ryan Yarborough, Jose Soriano, Jeffrey Springs, Eric Fetty. I would love to treat any of these guys as kind of a start-by-start basis. If I had to roster a guy, it would probably be Mick Abel. I just really like, the stuff under the hood. The results have been good, but he also, he has probably, who knows how long his shelf life is? How long is he going to be on this Phillies rotation? And the rest, I find you're living on the edge with most of these guys. Ryan Yarbrough, though, has changed both his sinker and his changeup, which is a thing the Yankees do. And I think he's probably a little bit more, what'd you call it, crock potty?
Yeah, crock potty. I mean, that almost sounds like a different product, but a crock pot pitcher, forget it.
Oh, crock potty sounds like it's, yeah, that's right. Anyway, if there was a set it and forget it guy in here, it might be Yarbrough or Soriano, just because I know Soriano is volatile to an extent, but with the sinker, I think he's okay. He'll be okay. Yarbrough will be okay. But they're deep league guys. And in terms of upside, the only one I really want is Mick Abel.
I think that's a good overall take. And I think it's time to bring on our senior hot dog correspondent, Niv Shah. Niv is here, and this is going to be perhaps the most loaded segment we have had so far, because there are 2 full dog reviews coming up here in just a few minutes. Niv, thank you so much for making time for us again today.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm a little nervous about today. I'm going to be honest. But the hot dog side of things, at least. We'll get to it.
We'll get to the hot dogs in just a couple of minutes, but we want to talk about some players that are being frequently added, most auctioned players on Ottoneu in the last week or so. Lots of auctions running right now. Lance McCullers Jr., we were just talking about him a couple minutes ago, the most auctioned player right now, and Ryan Yarbrough, as Eno just mentioned, with some changes for the Yankees. I mean, an old dog can learn new tricks, apparently. I kind of thought Ryan Yarbrough was what you see is what you get at this point, but he's getting an opportunity on a good team. We've seen him run nice ratios in the past, and I think it's more a commentary on just how bad pitching injuries have been, and how anybody with a pulse on a good team that could give you something is going to be of interest in Ottoneu and really everywhere.
Yeah,
I mean, we were talking about that just before.
Never panic.
Yeah, we were talking about it just before coming on. Yarbrough is just it makes sense, but the fact that it makes sense is upsetting. You don't it makes sense, but it's tough. It's just not inspiring, right? But it's hard to be inspired at this part of the year until you start seeing prospects start coming up later in the year or whatever. Pitching is what it is right now.
There's at least one prospect on there, Jonah Tong, getting some love in Ottoneu, and I think My question for you about Tong and pitchers that are similar is like, what does your roster situation typically look like when you're stashing a guy like this? Like, how often are you adding a prospect at AA if you're also contending? And how much of your roster do you allocate to players like that? It's a larger roster. You're always trying to balance winning now and playing for the future, even in those situations. But are you doing something like that if you're contending right now in most circumstances?
I think in Ottoneu you probably are not, which isn't the most logical. I mean, it doesn't sound logical because you do have, like you mentioned, 40-man rosters a little bit deeper. But it turns out it's nicer to have platoon depth or just the ability for like absorbing a day off from a starter for you. And hitting your game caps becomes really important in Ottoneu because especially in the points format, which is the most popular one. If you don't have 162 games at second base, for example, you are leaving points on the table. Like that's just the fact of the matter. So is it better to have like a backup middle infielder or a AA pitcher? Well, if you're really trying to optimize your points output or optimize your overall like statistical output of your team, it's better to have that backup middle infielder. I would guess Jonah Tong is getting a little bit of love. Obviously, he is pitching really well right now, but he's getting a little bit of love from teams that are, post Memorial Day sort of thinking like it might be time to like gather up whatever is around. Because the other thing about Ottoneu is that, we'll add players as soon as they sign with their major league teams out of the draft. And that's sort of like an early July thing. And what you want to do is sort of figure out where you are sitting in terms of your budget and your minor league system, such as it is, if you are looking to rebuild ahead of when those auctions start. Because first rounders, there's a lot of hype for them because, they're covered on TV, that you get a lot of press about them, so everyone knows their names. Some of them have just come off being on ESPN for 2 straight weeks of the College World Series and everything. So there's a ton of hype, and you really need to know like what does your farm want to look? What do you want your farm to look like as you get into like August, September, maybe late trades or thinking about next year. So I think like now is the time to grab ascendant AA, AAA guys that are like, maybe weren't top 100 at the beginning of the year, but maybe could break into it now.
Those mid-season updates are starting to roll out
That's right.
in a lot of places. And then the updates, I think, over time have become even more frequent. But I think a lot of outlets have some fresh ranks up. And Tong's definitely a riser. He's got a 2.02 ERA, a 102 whip, 83 Ks in 49 innings.
Yeah, that's the number. That's the thing
absurd.
Right there. Yeah. Ridiculous. So that'll get a lot of attention. And I think if you are trying to be competitive, you're probably hoping someone else takes that Jonah Tong. You probably aren't bidding.
Kyle Teal's a guy that people are going to be thinking a lot about. He's on that most auction list right now. Should be up for the White Sox soon. 8 homers and 7 steals in 50 games at AAA. Nice to have a catcher that can do everything. Keeping the K rate manageable at 25.4%. He also walks a ton too, so you've seen some really nice OBPs from him throughout his time in the Red Sox system before he was traded this winter. Given the way catchers work in Ottoneu, you have 2 slots. You don't have to use them all the time. You still get the same cap, 162 games. So what does that do for a player like Teal? Because I find in traditional rotisserie leagues, the young catchers breaking through are really frustrating players to roster when their playing time ends up being 30 to 50% of a share. Like their teams want them to play enough, but they don't always trust them with game calling and all the things that they want from a catcher. So do these guys fit better in Ottoneu given the way the roster is built?
Yeah, I think they do. One of the big things in Ottoneu in most formats, you have 2 catcher slots. And the main reason we still have those 2 catcher slots is because if you don't have them, it becomes almost impossible to hit your game caps. And like I mentioned earlier, in points leagues especially, hitting your game caps is really important. Kyle Teal, it's a great example of, if you're like 21, 22, you probably are not going to come in and start 4 games or 5 games a week. He can be your supplemental catcher with a more traditional catcher. So the way to think about it is someone more like, well, I guess less like an Adley Rutschman, or less like who we talked about in the past, like a Soderstrom or a Rice, where those guys play every day. But if you have more of a traditional catcher that, like Keibert Ruiz, for example, who generally won't play on a day game after a night game, and generally won't be slotted into DH. Sometimes he will, but generally won't be. Kyle Teal can be like a great complement to that, because he'll be picking up those extra games, and so you're not giving up. You're not giving up overall production. You are getting like a nice compliment, and then next year, if he does well this year, next year you're looking at a nice starting catcher. Like, you've solved starting catcher for next year. So, I think in a more traditional league, he's more of a stash, right? Like, he's more of a more traditional keeper league. You're like, okay, I'll snag him, or you could be like, oh man, maybe the White Sox maybe the White Sox will throw Kyle Teal out there 6 days a week, because like, why not? What else do they got going on? So you can look at it that way. But I think in Ottoneu, he can play like really. He can fit even in a competitive team. He can fit really well.
I think we got to get to the hot dog reviews. There's a
lot to talk about. There's a lot to talk about, and there are 2 hot dogs, and I don't know. The second one is going to be a conversation. We're going to have to have a conversation.
I think the first one's a little bit of a mess here, and I'm going to ask the first question about this. So the San Francisco dog was the first of the 2 dogs for this week. And the description, healthy? Maybe not with this beef frank topped with herb mayonnaise piled high with a savory vegetable slaw.
I'm into this one. We called it to a certain extent too. Like, there's a garlic aioli on there.
Yeah, we got that part right. But why slaw? Because they're trying to just have a healthy thing, and they think coleslaw's healthy.
It's got vegetables in it.
It's got vegetables.
Well, I'll give you guys a quick note on this one. The slaw, while described maybe terribly in that sign, it was like a quick pickle situation.
Oh,
really crunchy, so a lot of good texture. Not soggy, and not sitting out
overly wet.
Yeah, not wet. And I think that's the only way this works.
Yeah.
If I had this in the 7th inning, I might have been like, that's a wet hot dog. I didn't love that. But I had it before the game started, and I thought it was simple, it was understated, and it was like, it felt refreshing. Now, what does it have to do with San Francisco? I mean, it also has like this idea of what like other people think San Francisco is. I think that's the most interesting thing about these hot dogs, and it's like worth saying explicitly. Like, this isn't a San Francisco dog; it's what the Washington Nationals think of San Francisco, right? Like,
and maybe this one specific person.
Yes, right. Like, maybe that one guy. Like, this isn't like right. This isn't like, what you could do is you could say, well, I'm going to reach out to 29 other people in Major League Baseball and be like, what do you guys think your hot dog would be? But that's not what this is. So it's like it's sort of like through a lens, and I really enjoy that part of it, right? Because it's like it's sort of like it's steeped with like an attitude of like, what does Washington D.C., which is like this mid-Atlantic, not quite New York, but surely down for some East Coast bias, think about. Yeah,
and the flavor text points in that direction, right?
Yeah.
Healthy? No.
Yeah, healthy. Like, do you think everyone is a vegetarian in San Francisco? You put this on a hot dog. Like, let's move.
I'm just thinking, I didn't see that much slaw in the 2 years I was in the Bay Area. It's not a frequently served side out there.
No.
They're just not doing that. But I'm glad that it wasn't wet, because a wet hot dog will make all of us sad.
And I feel like
no one wants that.
The words in the description make you think is going to be like, picnic coleslaw that you would think of at a barbecue or something. And it was more like a really light
culinary terms. Slaw is like can be.
It's just like you chopping those vegetables in that way.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So it had a good crunch. I
always
want
like
to really
also like this against like what would we do? Like, we who know San Francisco, what would we do? I think I'd probably go Asian somehow. I mean, it's a very Asian city.
It is very Asian city. I would definitely just lean into the garlic. Like I've been, Giants Park.
There's
dish,
tons of garlic. Just put some garlic fries on top of it or something.
Yeah,
Yes, garlic fries on the dog.
Yeah, just garlic fries on the dog.
This sounds like a winner. Like you would get this again. Like if you went to 2 games in the same series, you'd go back and get the dog again.
But I would not. I would get it.
It's not like top 5 or something.
Well, no. If I was in charge of like the culinary situation at Nationals Park, I would just be like, here is another hot dog. Like it wouldn't be like
don't put San Francisco on.
Yeah. It's just like this thing worked. It worked. So let's just start there. It worked. So that's important because we've had some of these that didn't work, but it isn't really like I lived in the Bay Area for a little bit. It is not a Bay Area food. It is what an uninformed East Coast biased person thinks San Francisco is like, and like. That's just what it is. And I like that about this experiment that they're doing at Nats Park. I think that's a fun part of it because it's like so silly. Like, obviously how serious can we take any of this? But it's like, it's very fun.
Well, the next one
great
people
question.
might take serious.
Yeah. People are going to get very upset about this. So we have a Chicago dog or the Nats Park take on one.
It looks so terrible. What?
It is the ugliest hot dog you presented us so far this season.
And it did have the poppy bun, like you said.
It did have the poppy bun.
Yep.
What I like about this hot dog is that a good Chicago dog, and I've only had a couple, is very beautiful. And like Eno said, this is clearly well arranged and very properly put together, composed, and it still looks so dumb.
Looks awful.
So dumb.
It's just so silly looking. Obviously, like tomatoes are like high variance in terms of general. In general, tomatoes are a high variance food, so they're not going to get us the best tomatoes.
They don't look like the best tomatoes. Even the pickles don't look like the best pickles. Then the jalapenos don't look like good jalapenos.
No,
they all look like it's 3 days old.
Yeah. So underneath the jalapeno, there is chopped onion and just the regular Heinz relish.
I can see a little bit of that onion peak.
And then there is mustard down there. So look, I have some ideas, and I would like to go first, Derek, because I think you're. Like, no offense, but I think Derek is probably the expert here on the Chicago dogs. Yeah, so I was there with a couple Cubs fans, and we were talking a little bit about like what they got right, what they got wrong. I'll say first off, just so everyone knows how this is colored, all of us liked it.
Oh, okay. So it tasted good.
It was fun to eat.
Okay.
Again, it is like a cartoon filter of what an East Coast person thinks a Chicago dog is. But we liked it. The things it presented well, I thought, was that Chicago dogs have a bunch of crap on them. This had a bunch of stuff on it, right? It's very busy. It was clearly like it was dragged through the garden, as my friend said, with the relish and everything. So it had it's piled high with toppings. It's good. The poppy seed bun, also good. A couple of notes that I mentioned. Obviously, jalapenos, like that's going to be the headline. Like, does that immediately make this a non-qualified hot Chicago dog? Is this now just something
Chicago
else?
dog does not normally have jalapenos on it.
Does not. No.
It has something called a sport pepper, right?
Yes.
And what is
a sport pepper?
A sport. So I think what they were trying to do with the jalapeno is they were trying to replicate a sport pepper without buying a pepper that they would have to try to reuse some other way and not have any other use for, because it is a little bit spicy, but it's a long skinny pepper, and it's almost like, to me, like a pepperoncini. Like if you think about sliced pepperoncini, it's a little bit like that, but it's a skinnier pepper. And then of course the bright green neon relish, like that's also on the Chicago dog usually. And then Niv,
what color is the sport pepper?
It's actually kind of a light green color.
I think it's like this. It's a similar color to a pepperoncini, right?
Yeah, it's a lot like a pepperoncini, but just it's a long skinny pepper.
Yeah.
Okay.
But so you're trying to bring the heat of that, and you understand why they're doing that. The relish is traditional relish and not the bright green relish, which I guess there's a distinction there. Which just me making that face and asking that question makes me really concerned that some Chicago people are going to show up at my house and be like, Nick, what are you talking about? Obviously, this is a really different. The one thing, Derek, you're right that they didn't want to buy the sport pepper, but they did buy the poppy seed buns.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that deserves some credit. This is a little complicated, but there's 2 stands that make these hot dogs in the stadium. One of them always grills the buns. It's just an automatic thing they do. So this was a grilled bun, which I know is wrong. You're making a bad face.
Why? Like,
what? Well, why is that a bad thing? It's just heating up the bun.
Yeah, I thought it was nice. And my buddy next to me was just like, it's too crunchy. And I'm like,
the crunch comes from other things on a Chicago dog. It doesn't need to come from the bun. That's. I'm not from Chicago. Like
but you've had them.
I'm steeped in the Midwest. I have a lot of opinions about sausage. Like it's. Here's one more thing, real quick. Right, the tomatoes on the Chicago dog. Fine, that's your thing. People from Chicago, among all the people I've met, are the most aggressive, don't put ketchup on your hot dog people ever. And I didn't go to culinary school. What is ketchup made from?
It's amazing how aggressive people are about ketchup specifically in Chicago.
Yeah, it's weird.
And then we're like, we're gonna put like a mediocre tomato on this.
Yeah, we're gonna put a bad chunk of tomato on there.
All is missing a little sugar.
No, so now, okay, look. So I don't want this to turn into now we're bashing the Chicago dog. I feel like we could go down that path.
Nope.
No.
And then the other note I got, Derek, and we mentioned this, was that the hot dog was a little big. So can you talk to me a little bit about like the actual like hot dog was, a thick hot dog. It was like a proper Hebrew National quarter pound, and that made it. My friends were like,
Chicago dog is supposed to be like a skinny long dog.
Well, things just start falling off really quick.
Yeah, you just gotta have more room in the bun. They use a smaller dog there, smaller Frank for the Chicago dog. It's just the way it goes. And celery salt too, right? No celery salt.
No celery salt. Yeah, which that feels like that could have been addressed, because celery. Look, man, you don't want to buy.
You gotta have that somewhere in the.
You don't want to buy a bunch of sport pepper. I get that. I don't know what a sport pepper is other than for literally a Chicago dog. Salt. You can use celery salt. Yeah, that's. But I'm of 2 minds. One mind is like, look, I've lived in Chicago briefly. I am not really from Chicago in any kind of real sense as an adult. I have only had a couple of these. I know most of the rules they broke. The bun being steamed and the hot dog being smaller were new to me. But even if I know what the toppings need to be to get a proper, and I don't know where this was going. Like on one hand, I'm like, kudos to you guys for trying to do a Chicago dog, when we've just talked about the San Francisco dog and it's just like unmoored and unconnected from the region. But on the other hand, like, what if you just did something unmoored and unconnected from the region and just were like really goofy instead of, because you were never gonna
be happy.
Yeah. You were never gonna nail this one. So like,
yeah, people were gonna be mad no matter what they did. I think that was the main takeaway for me. But yeah, if you're gonna put a salad on top of a hot dog, you gotta use a smaller dog. That's the main rule as far as getting that to work. There's a bonus hot dog review. I had some hot dogs recently.
Love it.
The Mr. Baseball's famous Franks. It's surprising I had not eaten these previously because they've been around for a while. Usingers out of Milwaukee had a Bob Uecker supported hot dog, and they still make them, which is great.
On it.
I love that. It's just, I love that. It's beautiful.
And look, so for me, like a basic hot dog at home, like a Hebrew National dog, throw that on the grill. It's going to turn out pretty good. Throw whatever toppings you want on it. Yeah, put ketchup on it if you want. I'm not going to yell at you. Like, make it taste however you want it to taste. Good job. These were very similar to Hebrew Nationals in terms of quality, maybe slightly better seasoning. The one thing that I don't understand about some hot dogs, and perhaps this is actually a cooking method thing and not an actual hot dog thing. You ever notice sometimes hot dogs like bubble up? They get kind of like a funky like it's not a bad texture necessarily, but there's like little pockets of air in the casing or something.
Right.
That's my only complaint. Aesthetically, these just looked a little odd because they had some of that bubbling going on.
That might be heat. That might be a heat problem.
I think it might be a heat problem because my grill was like
slamming,
shooting flames that day.
Yeah.
I got to clean my grill.
Though I do feel you on that, because the aesthetics of the hot dog. Like one thing, man, this is proof I've had too many hot dogs because of you guys this year. But one thing I've noticed is the Nats dogs, pretty nice char on them. Maybe I should do a plain one next time, just so you guys can see the baseline that we're working with here, because they got a nice char on them. They're generally aesthetically pleasing. They're big for a $5, $6 base hot dog at a ballpark. It's pretty good. So I think they deserve a little bit of credit for that too, which is a weird thing to say. But I mean, you guys have been to ballparks with bad hot dogs, right? Like, you ever think about getting a hot dog at Giants, like at a Giants stadium?
Oh, I was just you weren't here for it, but I just gave a review of a Giants hot dog I got yesterday that was awful.
Was it a brat?
Like, I got a bratwurst, and they didn't leave it on the grill long enough, so the casing wasn't snappy. So
that's not.
And they gave me they didn't toast the bun, and they gave me onions and peppers, and then they gave me this brat that didn't have any snappiness to it,
any resistance. So it's just mush.
The whole thing was just like a big old mush.
Yeah,
like you just take a bite and you're like, what?
Yeah, like if I'm going to Giants Park, and I'm hoping to go to Giants Park in a couple weeks, I think I would just get garlic fries, right? Like
there's just a quick recommendation for anybody. You get the garlic fries if you want to do the thing that everyone does, right? And they're pretty decent. The other thing that's worth the line is probably the crab sandwich, which is just a bunch of butter and a bunch of crab. And then the sort of underrated thing, there's a couple. There's an ahi pokey thing over by first base. And since I'm at the park so often, I'm like, today I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to get some ahi pokey.
Actually healthy. That's where the whole thing came from on the San Francisco dog.
Yeah. Well, it's not.
I'm just be glad that they put the ahi pokey on top of the hot dog. Although, I might take one bite of that. The other one is just they have these Japanese fried chicken sandwiches.
No, that sounds pretty good.
They're just really well done. But just an idea, and this is not what this is, but I wonder if it'd be fun to do the exact opposite of what this is, and basically bring in like a celebrity chef from each of these cities, and like turn it into a thing where you're like, I don't know. There are certain chefs that are associated with certain cities. I don't know who would be for Chicago, but basically have like a big chef that's like, and you'd get people waiting in line. You'd get people coming to that game for that chef or for that reason. And, they could be there for like an hour, and then their dog that they made could be there for the whole series. And it would be sort of high level. Maybe you can even charge like $25 for it.
I think it's also like, again, I said this at the beginning of the segment, but it's just like, what if the guy at Nats Park who gets to make these calls, which, they're having fun. This is clearly not.
This is not what I'm suggesting. This is just sort of a fun little thing they're doing. Yeah. But
this is a joyful thing that they're doing. Like, it's fun. It's like it has to be, because they are doing different things for each thing, and that's fun. We've gone from a Chicago with a garden on it all the way back to that Orioles dog with like that 2 pounds of crab or whatever.
Crabs on it.
So like, they're having fun with it. I think you just do something like, hey, I'm going to call up the guy at the Giants. I'm going to call up the guy at the Dodgers. I'm going to call up the guy at the Royals and
that's
be like,
somewhere in between our two ideas.
Yeah, but I think that's like an attainable idea, because these guys, it's 30 teams. This is a small club. We talk about this all the time. So like, you can do this, and it'd be like, but I also really do enjoy that this is just some like 3 or 4 dudes at the 3 or 4 people at Nats Culinary just being like, I hope it's like they're sitting in a room and they're like, here's who's coming up in the next 2 weeks. Go. No bad ideas. That's what I want.
I imagine this sort of that 70s show, a smoky room.
Yeah. It's like
we're gonna put on the dog this week.
Yeah, it's like the Simpsons bit about how they picked the president or whatever, but for the hot dogs.
You were going apoplectic there for a second, DVR. What was your idea there?
So my idea was that you could take a place that maybe needs a little juice. Let's say Anaheim, right? Anaheim could use a little juice, but its proximity to Los Angeles gives it, easy access to celebrities, right? So let's say the Cubs are visiting the Angels for an interleague series. and you could have a celebrity who would represent a city.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
So let's say we get Jeremy Allen White out there firing up some dogs. And
Yeah.
maybe,
Right.
you know, like that.
And we put whatever Jeremy Allen White says to put on the dog, and
Yeah.
maybe he knows exactly what.
Maybe he knows, maybe he doesn't. But like, you know,
maybe he
you
puts
do-
ahi pokey on it.
And he drops the line. He's like, "That's fire, chef." Like he just, you know, he does the thing.
Yeah.
So like, that'd be pretty cool.
just 2 minutes of video on Twitter or on X or whatever, and it's just like, boom, go. Now you guys want to go to the
mean,
Angels game. I
This
want to
is
go to
the
the Angels
kind
game.
of
when
stuff
that
they
happens.
do in the minor leagues. I mean, the Washington, there's a Washington minor league team that actually had a famous chef come in. I remember this. There was a big presentation, and people were waiting in line outside for like hours before the game started.
That's
'Cause they had,
crazy.
like,
That's such a
celebrity
that's
chef
so-
do the food.
That's so fun. I love it.
I think some of these major league teams need to bring some of that minor league energy in terms of ideas.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Nats are the Nats. I feel like this is what they're doing. Like, it's good.
Yeah.
You know, we have Will It Float up on the jumbotron, or they just
Like the witch trials.
no, like last year, a local grocery store sponsored it, and they just threw produce in a bucket, and it always floats because produce floats.
Vegetables.
It's amazing. It was so good. Just take a giant head of cabbage and throw it into a bucket, and just be like, "Will it
And this
float?"
is the
You
thing
guys,
they do on the jumbotron or something.
they do it in between innings. It's great. Yeah, it's like one of the greatest things I've ever seen in my life. It's just like the answer is
The
yes.
answer is
but
always yes.
But I'm still excited. I still want to see you throw this thing into it. And then they do.
You're like,
stuff
maybe
this.
one day it won't float.
Wow. Like, well, then
But
they
like
take
an
the cabbage up, they
avocado
clean
doesn't
it.
float, does it?
Oh, it all floats, man. It just all like it's.
See, that's
alive.
This is
You
why.
guys-
Yeah, you're in. That's what I'm saying. You're gonna
hooked.
see something. You'd be like, surely this is the one. Surely, surely we have found a piece of fruit or vegetable that will not float. And it's just like the best part about it is the production value of it, because it's just some intern in their backyard got a bucket
Just
and a
throwing
folding table and did like 20 of them in one day, and then they do it once a week. It's so good. And like, you know, and then they do the hot dog, and they have the presidents with the big heads. It's fun. It's like, you know, and that's the stuff you have to do when you are unwilling to produce starting pitching.
Got to be good at distractions. That's the way to go.
You gotta have, yeah, or you know, Mackenzie Gore pitches once every 5 days, so it's pretty fun.
Yeah, those 4 days, you got to bring it.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm out of town for the next couple, but I might have some fun stuff from the road for you guys in a couple of weeks.
Well,
That's
we're
my
looking
hope.
forward to that, Niv. We appreciate your time and your insight as always. 30 minutes of hot dog reviews. Well, we have
Love
like
it, guys.
5 minutes of baseball in there, but that's what people are here for. But yeah, safe travels, Niv. We'll catch up with you again in a couple weeks.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.
It's our senior hot dog correspondent, Niv Shah. He's also the founder of Autonew, bringing you even closer to the hot dogs that you can't get at the ballparks near you. All right, let's get to a few more pitchers, getting down a little further. Some guys that might be more widely available, under 40% rostered right now. We're going to include the under 20% in this group too. One of your favorites, Edward Cabrera, still sitting down there. Chad Patrick for the Brewers, under 40%, getting great results. I don't know how he's getting away with it, but he's getting away with it. Some lower rostered guys like Sawyer Gibson-Long, who just came back from a couple of big injuries, Charlie Morton back in the rotation, and then the likes of Slade Taccone and Quinn Priester kind of working in a bulk role right now. So anybody out of that group, the below 40% that you think stands out to have a little more juice that could be viable for at least a few starts?
Edward Cabrera dropped his arm slot, changed his pitch mix, and is in the midst of the best 5-game stretch of command in his career. So I pick him off of this list. But you have to be careful with this type of analysis because Charlie Morton has thrown a kick change. How far do you want to push this kind of analysis? I love Charlie Morton, but he's not the next guy I take. The next 2 guys I take off this list are Chad Patrick and Sawyer Gibson-Long. Long does some interesting things, but he didn't go deep in that situation. So I'm going to actually leave him down there unless I really need him, because him, like Priester, interesting pitcher, sinker, not the ideal fastball shapes, and not the ideal roles where both of them might be used in these weird 3 to 4 inning roles where it's going to be hard to know exactly when he's starting and if he'll get you that W. So Chad Patrick is being used more like a regular starting pitcher, and he keeps throwing harder. He's now up to 94 plus, and he is a little bit Lance Linney in that he basically throws a bunch of fastballs, different kinds of fastballs. But I don't think Milwaukee is a scary park anymore. Sometimes I used to put it in my head as like a hitter's park. It doesn't really seem to be playing that way. And so, you know, I like the Brewers in terms of getting the most out of their pitchers. And, you know, he seems to have good game plans for what he has. So Patrick and Cabrera are my picks off this list.
Yeah, Chad Patrick, I thought was of the Patrick versus Priester toss-up from like a month plus ago. I thought Patrick was more likely to end up in the bulk role that Priester is in now, and then more likely to get bumped off the roster. I think I said at the time, I felt like Priester was more likely to be this year's Tobias Myers. So far, it's been Patrick. Priester has pitched better recently in that adjusted role. Like DL Hall went in front of him, I think, last time out, and then Priester came in for 5 against the Phillies and was really good. So we'll have to see how this continues to evolve. But the thing about their pitching, they continue to find optimal usage for just about everybody. That's the part that makes like leaning on guys that might have wobbly skills makes it more viable.
Yeah, and they're I mean, I don't mean to make it so stark because they're Patrick's a risk too in terms of game log. You can see he failed to crack 5 innings in 3 out of his last 6 starts, but there are those 6 inning starts in there as well. So and you go 6 against the Phillies with 6 strikeouts and 0 walks and 2 earned, and you got my attention. And the nice thing about the Brewers is like, yes, you might get a start where you don't get the 5 and you don't get the W, but they also got him unscathed out of Boston. You know what I mean? Like, would you take 4 2/3 scoreless against Boston, or would you take 5 2/3 with like 4 earned and the win?
That's so. Yeah, are the extra runs, the damage to the ratios worth that win? Probably not at this point in the season. And that's why the wins are such a frustrating category, because that sweet spot, that third time through the order, ends up being critically important for a lot of those back end starters. You're maximizing ratios, but you're reducing or even eliminating the chances of a W with that sort of approach.
Yeah, but they're careful with him. But he's also not as we've seen some other guys like a David Festa who couldn't crack 20, and Patrick has had 27 batters faced. 23 multiple times, 26. So I think they've got some rubric where maybe there's certain lineups where he just matches up well against them, or there's a certain efficiency he's at, or something that they like where they let him go a little bit longer.
Right. Open up a big enough lead, let them keep going, save your bullpen. Maybe fewer lefties in a lineup, you can let them go a little bit more. I'm sure there's a few different factors like that to consider. One reliever question for you, kind of a reliever ladder, like a closer re-rack sort of thing. Like Raisel Iglesias was part of that meltdown against Arizona on Thursday. Tanner Scott's had a couple of meltdowns. Camilo Doval's got the job back. We've talked about Daniel Palencia as maybe the favorite for the Cubs to get some saves. And then Will Vest has been ticking up in roster rates. I think he's in the 70% range now on CBS. As those 5 guys go, how would you stack them up? I mean, I assume in most leagues, Iglesias and Scott are still held, but they're not 100% rostered. So there could be some shallow formats where people have moved on and tried to find upgrades.
Yeah, there's almost like a little bit of a would you rather where I'm going to take Scott over Iglesias. That's like one sort of tier. In that next tier of Doval, Palencia, and Vest, I think I'm actually taking Palencia out of all of them. And it has a little bit to do with what is the alternative. We've already seen Bob Melvin go to Randy Rodriguez, who has superior numbers in a lot of categories to Camilo Doval. So, how is that sort of a game that's like headed long term? I don't think it's short term. I don't think it is Randy Rodriguez right now. I think Doval gets the next save opportunity, right? But I do think that Randy Rodriguez may be headed towards that job. Will Vest, I like, but it's not a very stuff heavy approach. And it's also not in a bullpen that has really anointed one closer and gone with it. It's kind of a committee type situation. So that's why I'm reaching for Palencia, because I don't think that there's necessarily anybody else that's really challenging him that hardcore for that job. And I think that they are the type of place that would like to anoint one closer, and I think they're going to go with it. So I'm re-ranking all those guys. Robert Garcia might go last. You've got him listed as part of this whole thing. I am still interested in him in deeper leagues. He should be owned, and it could be a situation where he just finally becomes the closer there. It's just as a lefty, it's a little bit less likely, maybe.
Yeah, Garcia versus even Will Vest probably is a smaller gap than you would expect based on how different their roster rates are right now. That was what was surprising to me. So I still have some interest in Garcia as well. A couple notes on the way out the door. You can join our Discord with the link in the show description. If you made it all the way to the end of this show, thank you. That's awesome. Be sure to rate and review the podcast anywhere you listen. Hit the like button. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can find Eno on Blue Sky, enosaris.bsky.social. I am dvr.bsky.social. Thanks to our producer, Brian Smith, for putting this massive episode together. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Monday.
Thanks for listening.